The stage coach driver looked at Rebecca Norton with tired eyes that held no sympathy, only the exhaustion of a man who had heard too many sad stories along the dusty trails of New Mexico territory. "Miss, if you cannot pay the fare from Fort Union to Santa Fe, you will have to wait here until you can wire for funds or find other arrangements." His words fell like stones into her stomach as she stood in the blazing July sun of 1878, surrounded by soldiers, traders, and drifters who all seemed to have somewhere to go while she had nothing but the dress on her back and dreams that had died somewhere between St. Louis and this God-forsaken military outpost. Rebecca's fingers trembled as she opened her small cloth purse again, knowing the contents would not have magically multiplied since the last time she checked. $3.47. The stage fare to Santa Fe was $12, and from there, she needed another 8 to reach Abiquiu where her aunt supposedly lived, though she had not heard from the woman in over 2 years. Her father's debts had consumed everything after his death, leaving her with nothing except a single letter from Aunt Margaret written long ago, inviting her to New Mexico if she ever needed a fresh start. Well, she needed that fresh start now more than ever, but apparently the West did not care about the desperation of a 22-year-old woman with no family and no prospects. "Please," she said, hating the quiver in her voice. "I can send payment once I reach my aunt." "She will help me, I know she will." The driver shook his head, already turning away. "I have heard that before, miss. I am sorry, but those are the company rules." Rebecca stood there in the courtyard of Fort Union, watching as other passengers climbed aboard the stage coach, their tickets secure, their futures seemingly assured. The fort bustled with activity around her, soldiers drilling in formation, supply wagons rolling through the gates, horses being shod at the blacksmith's forge. The air smelled of dust, horse manure, and the strange sage that grew everywhere in this harsh landscape. She had never felt so alone in her entire life. "Excuse me, madam." The voice came from behind her, low and careful, the kind of voice that did not want to startle. Rebecca turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his hat held in his hands. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of the summer sky. Dust covered his clothes, and she could see the wear on his boots, the frayed edges of his shirt collar. A working man, she thought, probably a ranch hand or cowboy passing through. "I could not help but overhear your situation," he continued, his gaze direct but kind. "If you need the stage fare, I can cover it." Rebecca felt her face flush hot. "I cannot accept charity from a stranger, sir. It is not charity." He stepped closer, and she noticed the way he moved, that easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. Call it one traveler helping another. The West is hard enough without folks refusing to help each other when they can. "I have no way to repay you. I did not ask for repayment." He pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket, counting out bills with hands that bore old scars and new calluses. "How much do you need?" Rebecca's pride warred with her desperation. She had been raised to be self-sufficient, to never depend on anyone, especially not strange men offering money with no strings attached. But what choice did she have? Sleep in the fort's dirt and hope for a miracle? Try to find work in a military outpost where the only jobs for women were the kind that would destroy what little dignity she had left? $20, she whispered. 12 for this stage, and 8 more to reach Abiquiu from Santa Fe. He counted out the bills without hesitation, holding them toward her. When she still did not take them, frozen by a mixture of gratitude and shame, he gently took her hand and pressed the money into her palm, folding her fingers over it. His hand was warm and rough, and the gesture held such unexpected kindness that Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she managed. "I do not even know your name." "Parker Zimmerman." He settled his hat back on his head, and she caught a glimpse of dark hair curling slightly at his collar. "Most folks call me Park. Rebecca Norton. I will find a way to repay you, Mr. Zimmerman, I promise." "No need, Miss Norton. Just help someone else someday when you are able." He touched the brim of his hat in farewell and turned to walk away, back toward the stables where a gray horse waited, saddled and ready to travel. "Wait," Rebecca called, surprising herself. He turned back, one eyebrow raised in question. "Are you traveling south, toward Santa Fe?" "I am headed to Abiquiu, actually. I have work waiting on a ranch there." "That is where I am going." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "My aunt lives there, or at least she did 2 years ago. Margaret Norton." Something flickered in Parker's expression, recognition perhaps. "I know of her. She runs a boarding house on the north edge of town. Good woman, fair and honest." Relief flooded through Rebecca so intensely she thought her knees might buckle. Her aunt was real, was still there, was alive and running a business. The journey had not been for nothing after all. "That is wonderful news. I was so worried. The stage will get you there safe enough." Parker glanced at the coach, where the driver was checking the harness one final time. "You should board now before they leave without you." Rebecca clutched the money he had given her, still warm from his pocket. "Thank you again, Mr. Zimmerman. I will not forget this kindness." She hurried to the driver, paid her fare with shaking hands, and climbed into the coach. Through the dusty window, she watched Parker mount his gray horse with practiced ease, the animal responding to his slightest touch. For a moment, their eyes met across the courtyard, and he nodded once before riding toward the gates. Something in that brief connection made her heart skip in a way she did not quite understand, a feeling both unsettling and strangely pleasant. The stage lurched into motion, and Fort Union fell away behind them, replaced by endless stretches of high desert, punctuated by piñon pines and twisted juniper trees. The other passengers, 2 merchants and an army wife, paid Rebecca little attention, lost in their own thoughts or dozing against the rocking of the coach. She pressed her forehead against the warm glass and thought about the man who had saved her from destitution without asking for anything in return. In her experience, no one did something for nothing. Men always wanted something, whether it was her father's business connections or her hand in marriage to settle a debt. But Parker Zimmerman had asked for nothing, expected nothing, and walked away as if $20 meant little more than a cup of coffee. The journey to Santa Fe took most of the day, the summer heat turning the coach into an oven as they rolled south through the mountains. They stopped twice to water the horses and allow the passengers to stretch their legs at ramshackle way stations that smelled of old grease and tired dreams. Rebecca ate a dry biscuit and drank lukewarm water, her mind drifting constantly to the cowboy with the kind eyes and scarred hands. She wondered what work waited for him in Abiquiu, whether they might cross paths again in that small town. The thought made her feel foolish. He had done a good deed, nothing more. She should not read significance into simple kindness. They reached Santa Fe as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, painting the adobe buildings in shades of gold and rose. Rebecca had barely an hour before the smaller coach departed for Abiquiu, just enough time to eat a proper meal and wash the worst of the dust from her face and hands. The restaurant near the stage office served surprisingly good stew, thick with vegetables and tender chunks of beef, and she realized she had not eaten a real meal in nearly 3 days. The food helped settle her nerves, gave her strength for the final leg of her journey. The coach to Abiquiu was smaller and more cramped, carrying only Rebecca and two miners heading north to prospect in the mountains. They talked between themselves about silver strikes and claim jumpers, their voices rough with tobacco and whiskey. Rebecca ignored them, watching as the landscape changed again, the mountains rising higher, the valleys growing narrower. She caught glimpses of the Rio Grande snaking through the terrain, its water precious and life-giving in this harsh country. Darkness had fallen by the time they rolled into Abiquiu, and Rebecca could see little of the town beyond what the scattered lanterns revealed. Adobe buildings, a church with a bell tower, corrals filled with horses and cattle. The driver helped her down, handed her the small carpet bag that contained all her worldly possessions, and pointed up a dirt street toward a two-story building with yellow light glowing in its windows. "That is the Norton boarding house," he said. "You cannot miss it." Rebecca's legs felt weak as she walked up the street, her bag heavy in her hand. What if her aunt did not remember her? What if she turned her away? She was 22 now, not the girl of 15 who had last seen Aunt Margaret at her mother's funeral. 7 years could change everything, could turn remembered affection into cold indifference. But when she knocked on the door and it swung open to reveal a sturdy woman with gray-streaked brown hair and familiar hazel eyes, recognition was instant and mutual. Sweet, merciful heavens, Rebecca. Aunt Margaret pulled her into a tight embrace that smelled of lavender soap and fresh bread. "Child, what are you doing here? Come in before you collapse." The tears came then, hot and overwhelming, all the fear and exhaustion of the past weeks pouring out in her aunt's warm kitchen while Margaret held her and made soft, soothing sounds. When the storm passed, Rebecca found herself seated at a scrubbed pine table with a cup of strong tea and her aunt's worried face across from her. She told the story haltingly, the words painful. Her father's gambling debts, the loss of their home in St. Louis, his death from a heart attack that the doctor said was brought on by stress and too much whiskey. The creditors who took everything, even her mother's jewelry. Her desperation to escape a city where she had nothing and no one, remembering the letter Aunt Margaret had sent years ago. "And then I ran out of money at Fort Union," Rebecca finished, her voice hoarse. "A cowboy named Parker Zimmerman paid my stage fare. He asked for nothing in return, just said to help someone else someday." Margaret's eyes widened. "Park Zimmerman." "Tall fellow, quiet, works harder than any 3 men combined. You know him." "Everyone in Abiquiu knows Park. He works for the Zacarias Ranch, been here about 3 years now. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is as decent as they come." Margaret poured more tea, her expression thoughtful. "His own story is a sad one. Lost his whole family to cholera when he was 19, drifted west looking for a fresh start, found work at the ranch and stayed." Rebecca's heart constricted. He had suffered too, had known loss and loneliness, and yet he had still found the generosity to help a stranger. "I promised I would repay him. You will have the chance. Abiquiu is not a large town." Margaret reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "But first, you need rest and regular meals. You look half-starved, child. You will stay here, help me with the boarding house, and we will build you a new life. That is what you came for, is it not?" "Yes." Rebecca managed a shaky smile. "Yes, that is exactly what I came for." The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Rebecca settled into her aunt's home and began learning the rhythms of running a boarding house. There were rooms to clean, meals to cook for the steady stream of boarders who came and went, linens to wash and mend. The work was hard but satisfying, giving her tired body and troubled mind something concrete to focus on. Aunt Margaret proved to be exacting but fair, teaching Rebecca everything from how to negotiate with suppliers to the best way to remove stubborn stains from pillowcases. Abiquiu itself was a small but bustling community, serving the ranches and farms scattered throughout the valley. The town sat in high desert country where the Chama River met the Rio Grande, surrounded by dramatic red and white cliffs that glowed like fire at sunset. The population was a mix of Hispanic families who had lived there for generations, Anglo newcomers seeking opportunity, and native peoples from the nearby pueblos who came to trade. Rebecca found the diversity fascinating, so different from the more rigid society she had known in St. Louis. On her fourth day in town, Rebecca accompanied her aunt to the general store to purchase supplies. The proprietor, a friendly Mexican man named Señor Gutierrez, greeted Margaret warmly and welcomed Rebecca with courteous curiosity. As they discussed flour prices and the quality of the latest sugar shipment, the door opened and Parker Zimmerman walked in. He stopped when he saw Rebecca, surprise crossing his face before settling into a pleased smile. "Miss Norton, I am glad to see you made it safely." "Thanks to you, Mr. Zimmerman." Rebecca felt her pulse quicken inexplicably. He looked different than she remembered, cleaner, his dark hair still damp from washing. He wore a clean shirt, mended in several places but obviously cared for. "I have been hoping to see you so I could thank you properly. You just did." He moved past them toward the back of the store, clearly intent on conducting his business quickly, but Margaret was having none of it. "Park Zimmerman, you stop right there." Her aunt's voice carried the authority of someone used to managing difficult boarders. "You cannot do someone a kindness like you did for my niece and then just walk away. You will come to dinner tonight at the boarding house, 7 o'clock sharp. I will not take no for an answer." Parker looked distinctly uncomfortable, his hat turning in his hands. "That is kind of you, madam, but not necessary." "Necessary or not, you will be there. Rebecca makes the best apple pie you have ever tasted, and you look like you could use a good home-cooked meal." Margaret fixed him with a look that had probably quelled stronger men than a lone cowboy. "Yes, madam." Parker's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. 7 o'clock. After he left the store with his purchases, Margaret turned to Rebecca with satisfaction. "Now we need to buy apples. I hope you remember your mother's pie recipe." "Aunt Margaret, you did not have to do that." "Of course I did. The man helped you when you were desperate, asked for nothing, and then tried to disappear into the background like he was not important. That kind of selfless decency deserves recognition." She selected apples with a critical eye, checking each for bruises. "Besides, unless I am very much mistaken, you would like to see him again." Rebecca felt her cheeks heat. "I barely know him. All the more reason to have him to dinner." Margaret's smile was knowing. "Get to know him, child. Good men are not as common as we might wish, especially out here." Rebecca spent the afternoon preparing dinner with more care than usual, telling herself it was simply gratitude and hospitality, nothing more. But she changed her dress twice, settled on her best blue cotton with the white collar, and pinned her auburn hair in a style that framed her face softly. When she caught herself checking her reflection for the third time, she forced herself to return to the kitchen and focus on the pie. Parker arrived precisely at 7, cleaned up and clearly uncomfortable in the social situation. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that he presented to Margaret with a shy formality that Rebecca found endearing. "For the hostess." "How lovely." "Rebecca, find a vase for these beautiful flowers." Margaret ushered Parker into the dining room where the table was set for 3. The other boarders had already eaten, giving them privacy. "Sit, sit. You must be tired after a long day." Over dinner, roast chicken with vegetables and fresh bread, Parker gradually relaxed. He answered Margaret's gentle questions about ranch life, describing his work with the cattle and horses in a way that revealed deep knowledge and genuine affection for the animals. He spoke of the land with reverence, the way the light changed on the red cliffs at different times of day, how the river sounded in spring when the snowmelt rushed down from the mountains. "How did you end up in Abiquiu?" Rebecca asked, genuinely curious. "Drifted here after my family passed." His voice remained steady, but she saw the shadow cross his face. "Worked my way west, taking jobs where I could find them. When I reached the Zacarias ranch 3 years ago, Mr. Zacarias offered me permanent work if I wanted it. I wanted it. This country, it has a way of healing a man if he lets it." "I hope it can heal a woman too," Rebecca said softly. His eyes met hers across the table, and understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared loss and the courage it took to start over. "I believe it can, Miss Norton." "I truly do. Please call me Rebecca. You saved me from a terrible situation. We are past formalities. Then you should call me Park. Everyone does." Margaret served the apple pie with a contented expression, clearly pleased with how the evening was progressing. The pie was good, Rebecca had to admit, her mother's recipe producing the perfect balance of tart apples, cinnamon, and buttery crust. Park ate 2 pieces and declared it the best he had ever tasted, praise that made Rebecca glow with pleasure. When the evening ended and Park rose to leave, he thanked them both with genuine warmth. At the door, he hesitated, looking at Rebecca. "I ride into town most Sundays for church services. Perhaps I might see you there." "We attend every Sunday," Margaret said before Rebecca could answer. "Sit with us if you like. We are always in the 3rd pew on the left." After he left, Rebecca helped her aunt clear the dishes, acutely aware of Margaret's knowing smile. "Do not say it." "I did not say anything." "You are thinking it very loudly," Margaret laughed. "He is a good man, Rebecca. And unless I am very much mistaken, he is quite taken with you. We barely know each other. Then get to know each other. You have time. Neither of you is going anywhere." She handed Rebecca a stack of plates to dry. "Your parents had a love match, you know. Your father was not always the troubled man he became. Once, he was young and brave and absolutely devoted to your mother. She saw something in him that no one else did, and she loved him with her whole heart. I think you have that same capacity for love, child. Do not be afraid of it." Rebecca thought about those words as she lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of Abiquiu settling in for sleep. Dogs barking in the distance, the low murmur of voices from the cantina down the street, the wind sighing through the cottonwoods. She thought about her father, trying to remember him before the gambling and drink, before the debts and desperation. There were good memories there, buried deep. Him teaching her to read, dancing with her mother in their parlor, laughing at some joke only the 2 of them understood. Love had been real once, before it was consumed by weakness and poor choices. Could she trust her own heart after seeing how badly love could turn? But then she thought of Park's steady gaze, his quiet kindness, the way he had helped her without seeking advantage. He was not her father. She was not her mother. They were 2 broken people trying to build new lives in hard country, and maybe that was enough to start with. Sunday arrived bright and clear, the sky that impossible blue that only seemed to exist in New Mexico. Rebecca wore her Sunday dress, a pale green that Margaret said brought out her eyes, and tried not to feel nervous as they walked to church. The building was adobe like most structures in town, with a beautiful carved wooden altar and simple wooden pews. It smelled of candle wax and incense, comforting and timeless. Park was already there, sitting near the back. When he saw them, he stood and moved to the 3rd pew, sliding in beside Rebecca with a murmured greeting. She was intensely aware of his presence throughout the service, the warmth of his body close to hers, the way his deep voice blended with hers when they sang hymns. His fingers brushed hers when they shared the hymnal, and the brief contact sent a shock of awareness through her entire body. After the service, several townspeople approached to welcome Rebecca officially to the community. She met ranchers and shopkeepers, farmers and craftsmen, all curious about Margaret Norton's niece from back east. Park remained at her side, a quiet, steadying presence, occasionally answering questions about the ranch or offering commentary that made people laugh. She realized that, despite his reserved nature, he was well-liked and respected here. People trusted him. "There is a dance next Saturday," mentioned Maria Gutierrez, the storekeeper's daughter, a lively young woman about Rebecca's age. "The whole town comes. You should attend, Rebecca. And you too, Park. We never see you at the dances." "I am not much of a dancer," Park said, but he glanced at Rebecca with something hopeful in his expression. "Neither am I," Rebecca admitted, "but perhaps we could learn together. I would like that." His smile transformed his face, revealing a warmth and joy she had not yet seen. "I would like that very much." The week leading up to the dance passed quickly. Rebecca threw herself into her work at the boarding house, but her thoughts constantly drifted to Park. She found herself watching for him when she ran errands, her heart lifting absurdly when she caught glimpses of him riding through town on his gray horse. They spoke briefly a few times, conversations about nothing important, just the weather or the state of the roads, but each interaction left her wanting more. Margaret noticed, of course, and took shameless pleasure in teasing her. "You light up like a candle when you see him." "I do not." "You absolutely do, and he is just as bad. The man nearly walked into a post yesterday watching you hang laundry." Rebecca could not help but laugh. "He did not." "He absolutely did. Señor Gutierrez told me about it," said. Park turned red as a beet when he realized people had noticed. The thought of the self-assured cowboy being so flustered by her was oddly thrilling. Rebecca had never considered herself particularly beautiful, just ordinary, but Park looked at her like she was something precious and rare. It made her feel beautiful, desired, seen in a way she had never experienced before. Saturday evening arrived, and Rebecca dressed in her best gown, a deep rose-colored dress with delicate white lace at the collar and cuffs. Margaret helped her arrange her hair in a more elaborate style, weaving in a ribbon that matched the dress. "You look lovely, child. He will not be able to take his eyes off you." The dance was held in the town's largest building, a community hall that served for everything from public meetings to celebrations. When Rebecca and Margaret arrived, the space was already crowded with people, farmers and ranchers and townsfolk, all dressed in their finest. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm, golden light over everything, and musicians tuned their instruments on a small raised platform at one end of the room. Rebecca spotted Park almost immediately. He stood near the far wall, wearing a clean black shirt and dark trousers, his hair neatly combed. When their eyes met across the room, he started toward her, moving through the crowd with purpose. "You look beautiful," he said when he reached her, the words simple and sincere. "Thank you." "You look very handsome." He offered his arm. "Would you like to dance? I should warn you I am dreadful at it. Then we will be dreadful together." She placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric, and let him lead her to the dance floor. He had not been exaggerating. Park was indeed terrible at dancing, stepping on her toes twice in the first minute and apologizing profusely each time. But Rebecca found she did not care. She was laughing too hard, caught up in the joy of the moment, the pleasure of being held in his arms even if they were moving in something that only vaguely resembled a waltz. "I am so sorry," he said after the third time he stepped on her foot. "I am better with horses." We can stand still if you prefer. Just sway to the music." They did, finding a rhythm that worked for them, close together while the music played and other couples whirled past with far more grace. Rebecca became aware of how nice he smelled, clean and slightly of leather and sage, distinctly masculine. His hand at her waist was warm and sure, and when she looked up at him, his eyes were focused entirely on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Rebecca." He said her name softly, like a prayer. "I know we have not known each other long, but I need you to know that when I helped you at Fort Union, it was not just kindness to a stranger. From the moment I saw you, something shifted in me. I looked at you and thought, this woman matters. I do not expect you to feel the same, and I will not pressure you, but I wanted to be honest." Her heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. "Park, I feel it too. I have been trying not to, trying to be sensible, but every time I see you, every time we talk, I want more. I want to know everything about you. I want—" "What do you want?" His voice was rough with emotion. "This." She leaned closer, closing the distance between them until they were barely an inch apart. "I want this." He kissed her then, right there on the dance floor with half the town watching. A soft, gentle kiss that promised everything and demanded nothing. When they pulled apart, Rebecca saw Maria Gutierrez grinning at them and several older ladies tittering behind their fans, but she could not bring herself to care. Let them talk. Let them see. She was falling in love with Park Zimmerman, and she was not going to hide it. They left the dance early, walking together through the warm night, Margaret having tactfully gone home with friends. Park told her stories about his childhood in Missouri, about his parents and younger sister, all gone now, victims of the cholera epidemic that swept through their county. Rebecca shared memories of her own family, the good times before her father's decline, her mother's gentle wisdom, the pain of watching everything fall apart. They stopped by the river, the water silver in the moonlight, the sound of it soothing and eternal. Park took her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. "I was not looking for this for you. I thought I would just work and save money and maybe buy my own small spread someday, live out my life alone. And then you stepped off that stage and everything changed." "I was so afraid," Rebecca confessed. "Afraid I would end up desperate and broken, making choices I would regret. You saved me from that, gave me a chance to start over with dignity intact. You would have found a way. You are stronger than you realize. Maybe, but I am glad I did not have to find out." She squeezed his hand. "What happens now? Now I court you properly, if you will have me. Sunday dinners and walks and learning everything about each other. I know I do not have much to offer yet. I am just a ranch hand with some savings, but I am steady and I will work hard to build something better. I do not need much, Park. I just need someone who sees me, who values me for who I am, not what I can provide or what family connections I have. You did that from the beginning, asking nothing in return. How could I ask for anything when you were so clearly struggling? What kind of man would take advantage of that?" He shook his head. "No, if I am ever with you, it will be because you choose me freely, with no debts or obligations between us. Then I choose you." The words felt right, true, even though they had known each other such a short time. "I choose you, Park Zimmerman." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Rebecca felt safer than she had in years. They stood there by the river for a long time, just holding each other, listening to the water and the night sounds, two broken people beginning to heal together. The courtship that followed was sweet and intentional, both of them taking the time to truly know each other. Park came to the boarding house several times a week for dinner, helping Margaret with repairs and heavy lifting, treating the older woman with such respect and affection that she declared him her favorite person in all of Abiquiu. He and Rebecca took long walks together, exploring the trails around town, discovering quiet spots where they could talk for hours undisturbed. He showed her his world, teaching her to ride properly on a gentle mare from the ranch, taking her to see the red cliffs at sunset when they glowed like coals. She shared her world, reading to him from her small collection of books, teaching him the proper way to make pie crust, showing him that intellectual pursuits and hard physical work were not opposed but complementary. 3 months after they met, Park asked permission to speak with Margaret formally. Rebecca waited nervously in the kitchen while they talked in the parlor, knowing what he was asking, hoping with all her heart that her aunt would approve. When Margaret called her in, both of them were smiling. "Park has asked for my blessing to marry you," Margaret said, her voice warm with emotion. "I have given it, but the decision is yours, child. Do not let an old woman's hopes pressure you." Rebecca looked at Park, saw the love and hope and slight fear in his eyes, and felt her own heart overflow with certainty. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." His whoop of joy made Margaret laugh, and then Rebecca was in his arms, being spun around the parlor while her aunt clapped her hands in delight. When he set her down, Park pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "The only thing I kept when I left Missouri. I have been carrying it for years, never thinking I would have someone to give it to. It would honor me if you would wear it." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant for her. "It is beautiful. She would be happy to know it found me." They were married 6 weeks later in the same adobe church, where they had sat together that first Sunday. The whole town turned out for the celebration, filling the church to capacity and spilling out into the courtyard. Rebecca wore a simple white dress that she and Margaret had made together, with lace from her mother's wedding gown sewn into the bodice, connecting past and future. Park wore a new black suit that Señor Gutierrez had ordered specially from Santa Fe, and he looked so handsome that Rebecca's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. The ceremony was conducted in both English and Spanish by Father Miguel, who had served Abiquiu for 20 years. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Park kissed her with such tender joy that several women in the congregation wept. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Rebecca had seen in one place since leaving St. Louis. Park danced with her, still awkward but improving, and Rebecca thought she had never been happier in her entire life. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house in a room Margaret had prepared specially, with fresh flowers and clean linens and a privacy sign on the door. Park was gentle and patient, clearly determined to make the experience good for her, and Rebecca felt her body and heart open to him completely. In his arms, she felt cherished and desired and safe, all the fears and hurts of her past fading in the face of this new love. The next morning, they moved to a small house on the edge of town that Mr. Zacharias had offered to rent to Park at a reasonable rate, with the option to buy once they had saved enough. It was modest, just 4 rooms, but it was theirs. Rebecca threw herself into making it a home, sewing curtains, planting a garden, learning to cook on the old wood stove that heated unevenly and required constant attention. Park continued working at the ranch while Rebecca helped Margaret at the boarding house several days a week, both of them contributing to their savings. They fell into a comfortable routine, working hard during the day and coming together at night to share meals and conversation and love. Park proved to be everything Rebecca had hoped for in a husband: steady, kind, hardworking, with a quiet sense of humor that surprised her at unexpected moments. Their first year of marriage passed in a blur of happiness, punctuated by the normal struggles of building a life together. Money was tight, especially during the winter when ranch work slowed. Rebecca learned to stretch every dollar, making do and mending instead of buying new, growing vegetables to supplement their meals. Park took extra jobs when he could find them, breaking horses for other ranchers, helping with building projects in town, never complaining about the long hours or hard work. In the spring of their second year together, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Park over dinner, watching his face transform from confusion to comprehension to overwhelming joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt moisture on her neck from his tears. "We are going to be parents," he whispered, his voice breaking. "We are going to have a family." "We already are a family," Rebecca said, pulling back to look at him. "But yes, we are going to expand it." The pregnancy was difficult, especially during the hot summer months when Rebecca could barely keep food down, and the baby pressed on everything uncomfortably. Park was endlessly patient, rubbing her swollen feet at night, bringing her cool water from the well, adjusting his work schedule to be home more often. Margaret visited frequently, offering advice and support from her own experiences helping countless pregnant women over the years. In late October, during the season when the cottonwoods turned gold and the air finally cooled, Rebecca went into labor. It was long and painful, lasting almost 24 hours, but Park never left her side. He held her hand through every contraction, wiped her face with cool cloths, and spoke encouragement even when she cursed him for putting her in this condition. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Park wept openly at the miracle of it. They named him Peter Zacharias Zimmerman, honoring both his paternal grandmother and the rancher who had given Park his chance in Abiquiu. The baby was healthy and hungry, with Park's blue eyes and Rebecca's auburn hair, and both parents were instantly, completely besotted. Margaret declared him the finest baby ever born and spent hours rocking him while Rebecca rested and recovered. Parenthood was harder than either of them had anticipated. Peter was colicky, crying for hours at night, and Rebecca struggled with exhaustion and the overwhelming responsibility of keeping this tiny human alive. Park helped as much as he could, walking the baby at night, changing diapers without complaint, taking Peter with him on quiet rides when the motion would soothe the infant to sleep. They learned together, making mistakes and correcting them, growing into their roles as mother and father. As Peter grew from infant to toddler, Rebecca and Park found their rhythm. She had stopped working at the boarding house to focus on raising their son, but she took in sewing to contribute to the household income. Park had been promoted to foreman at the ranch, a position that came with better pay and more responsibility. They saved aggressively, their goal of owning their home and eventually a small ranch of their own always at the forefront of their minds. When Peter was 3, Rebecca became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body remembering what to do, and in the summer of 1883 they welcomed a daughter. They named her Rose Margaret Zimmerman, after no one in particular, except that Rebecca had always loved the name and Margaret wept with pride at the honor. Rose was an easier baby than her brother, content to sleep and eat and observe the world with serious gray eyes that gradually turned the same hazel as Rebecca's. Their little house felt full now, bursting with children and love and the controlled chaos of family life. Peter was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Park proved to be a natural father, patient and playful, teaching his son to ride and care for animals while cradling his daughter with infinite gentleness. 5 years after their wedding, Park finally saved enough to buy their house outright and purchase a small parcel of land just outside town. It was only 20 acres, but it had good water and decent grazing, enough to start a modest cattle operation. Mr. Zacharias helped them select breeding stock and offered advice as Park transitioned from ranch foreman to independent rancher. The work was grueling, requiring every ounce of energy and determination they possessed, but it was theirs. They were building something lasting, something they could pass to their children. Rebecca became involved in the community, helping organize church events and teaching Sunday school to the town's children. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, so when new families arrived in Abiquiu, she went out of her way to welcome them, often arriving with food and offers of assistance. More than once, she helped a struggling woman find work or housing, paying forward the kindness Park had shown her that day at Fort Union. On their 10th anniversary, Park surprised her with a trip to Santa Fe, their first time away from the children overnight. Margaret took Peter and Rose with delight, shooing them out the door with orders to enjoy themselves. In Santa Fe, they stayed in a real hotel, ate in a fancy restaurant, and walked the plaza like courting youngsters. Sitting in their hotel room that night, Rebecca looked at her husband, older now, lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun, his hands permanently scarred from a decade of hard ranch work, and loved him more than she had thought possible. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Helping me that day? Your life would have been simpler without a wife and children." Park pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Not for one single second. You and our children are the best thing that ever happened to me. Before you, I was just existing, working and sleeping and going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, a purpose beyond just surviving. I would do it all again, Rebecca. Every sacrifice, every hard day, every challenge, I would choose you every single time." She kissed him then, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into it, and they made love with the freedom of privacy, something they rarely had at home with two curious children. Afterward, lying in his arms, Rebecca thought about the terrified woman she had been at Fort Union, broke and desperate and convinced her life was over. She could never have imagined this future, this happiness, this family built on a foundation of unexpected kindness. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growth of their children. Peter grew tall and serious, naturally gifted with animals like his father. Rose was clever and determined, always reading when she could sneak a book away from her chores, asking questions that challenged her parents to think more deeply. They added 2 more children to their family, another son named Paul in 1886, and finally, a daughter named Ruth in 1889, completing their family. The ranch prospered gradually, never making them wealthy but providing steady income and security. Park's reputation for honest dealing and quality cattle spread throughout the territory, and he became a respected voice in the ranching community. Rebecca's kindness and generosity made her beloved in Abiquiu, and their home was always full of people, neighbors stopping by for advice or assistance, friends gathering for meals and celebration. Aunt Margaret lived to see all 4 of her great-nieces and nephews before passing peacefully in her sleep in 1892. Rebecca grieved deeply for the woman who had taken her in, who had given her a second chance when she had nowhere else to turn. They buried Margaret in the church cemetery, and Rebecca made sure fresh flowers adorned the grave every week. As their children grew older and the ranch became more established, Rebecca and Park found time to simply enjoy each other again. They took evening rides together, watching the sunset paint the red cliffs in impossible colors. They sat on their porch after the children went to bed, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence that came from truly knowing another person. Park still looked at her with the same love and wonder he had shown that first day, and Rebecca still felt her heart skip when he smiled at her across a crowded room. When Peter turned 18 in 1896 and announced his intention to start his own ranch in Colorado, Rebecca felt the bittersweet ache of watching a child leave home. But Park supported their son's dream, helping him select land and livestock, sharing everything he had learned over the years. They stood together watching Peter ride north, Rebecca crying openly while Park's jaw clenched with suppressed emotion. "He will be fine," Park said, pulling her close. "We raised him right. He knows how to work hard and treat people fairly. He will build something good." "I know. It just hurts to let him go." "That is how you know we loved him well." He kissed the top of her head. "Come on, we have 3 more children to feed and a ranch to run. Life does not stop for sentiment." Rose married a schoolteacher in 1898, a quiet, scholarly man who shared her love of learning. They settled in Abiquiu, and Rose helped establish the town's first proper school, teaching alongside her husband. Paul showed no interest in ranching, instead apprenticing with a lawyer in Santa Fe, much to everyone's surprise. Only Ruth seemed likely to stay and work the ranch, their youngest daughter possessing her father's affinity for cattle and horses. As the new century approached, Park and Rebecca found themselves entering middle age with grace, their bodies showing the wear of hard work but their spirits still strong. They had built something lasting, not just the ranch and the home, but a legacy of kindness and integrity. People in Abiquiu still told the story of how Park had helped a desperate stranger with no expectation of return, how that simple act of generosity had blossomed into one of the territory's most respected families. On a warm evening in June of 1900, Park and Rebecca sat on their porch, watching Ruth work with a young horse in the corral. They were in their mid-40s now, graying and weathered but still strong. Park reached over and took Rebecca's hand, lacing his fingers with hers in the familiar gesture that never got old. "You remember the day we met?" he asked. "Every detail. I was terrified and trying so hard not to show it. You appeared like some kind of miracle. You were so proud, so determined not to accept help, I almost walked away." "I am grateful you did not." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "That was the day my real life began, though I did not know it at the time. Everything before was just preparation for finding you. I think we found each other." Park pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the sage-scented evening air. "2 broken people looking for a fresh start. And we made it. Against all odds, we built this beautiful life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. Ruth finished with the horse and waved to them, heading to the barn to put away her tack. From inside the house, they could hear the clatter of dishes as their housekeeper prepared dinner. "I love you," Park said, simple and true, the words as meaningful now as the first time he had spoken them. "I love you too. Always." The years had been kind to them, filling their lives with children and grandchildren, with hard work and honest success, with a love that had only deepened over time. They had started with nothing except kindness and hope, and built a legacy that would outlast them both. When Rebecca thought back to that desperate woman at Fort Union, broke and terrified, she could hardly recognize herself. Park had not just paid her stage fare that day. He had given her a future, a family, a home, and a love that would sustain her for the rest of her life. As darkness fell over Abiquiu, they rose and went inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever the next day would bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together. The cowboy who had asked for nothing in return had received everything that mattered, and the desperate woman he had helped had repaid him 1,000-fold with love, loyalty, and the family they had built together. It was a good life, earned through kindness and hard work and unwavering commitment to each other. It was more than enough. It was everything.